Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time, another mini rant. And this time it's a topic that I've been mulling about, I've been thinking about this afternoon and pretty much for most of the day. And it's an interesting topic, and I think it's a topic that I think is worth discussing. And this is a topic of what really constitutes a classic film. And the reason why this is a mini rant is because I think there are a lot of people out there. I'm not calling out anybody, and I'm not saying that this is particularly a common occurrence, but it's common occurrence when it comes to whenever you say a classic film, which is considered a classic movie to a lot of people, whenever you dare say that I really don't think Citizen Kane is a classic, or Psycho, I really think is pretty overrated, and it's not a classic film to me. And then people just go, oh, yeah, that kind of stuff. Oh my God, what? That's the kind of stuff that I get. I'm really That's what this video is about a little bit of a rant on what the definition of a classic film is, and ultimately I think it's up to interpretation. I think it's all subjective. I think it's all one's personal opinion. I don't think there's just one definition of what classic is. I don't think a classic film is just something that, okay, use the dictionary definition of classic and that's it. No, I think in this instance, when you consider and you call a film a classic, I think that's up to personal opinion, and it's up to really whatever you think of classic film is or isn't. So just because a good majority of critics, or just because a good majority of people seem to say that this certain film is a classic, doesn't mean it's a classic to you, and it shouldn't have to be a classic to you, and there shouldn't be this teeth gnashing and this bitching and these people who go at your throat and want to strangle you verbally on the internet just because you dare to say something like the Exorcist is not that they don't you don't consider The Exorcist to be a timeless classic. I personally love The Exorcist, but I know a good friend of mine doesn't really like the film. But I'm not getting in his face, and I'm not telling him that he's a dumbass or he has no taste in films, or because he doesn't like the movie. And I'm not saying things that degrade him because he doesn't think that The Exorcist is a classic. Um, I just think that's one part of the movie fandom that I think is it puts a black eye on it. It's a nasty thing, and I don't know why it continues to happen. I think it's just for some reason some people seem to think if you say something that's different, if you say, for instance, this is my opinion, if you say something like, I really don't think Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is a classic movie. And then people would all be like, oh, what? They get all offended. Like you just smacked him in the face and punched him in the balls. I didn't do that. All I did was say my piece and say my personal opinion. And all I did was say I don't think it's a classic movie. I really don't. I don't think it's a classic film to me, because it's not a film I really particularly enjoy that much. I think it's all right. I really do. I think it's an all right film. There's some great visuals. I like the score. Anthony Perkins is great. He's fantastic. The direction is good by Hitchcock. But I honestly think there are better Hitchcock films than Psycho, and there's better horror films than Psycho. There's even a lot better horror films from that era that are better than Psycho. For instance, Robert Wise's The Haunting from 1963, I think, is a 10 times better horror film than Psycho, and I definitely do feel that that is a classic. But that's just my opinion. I just think that that movie's more of a classic to me than Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. And I think that's where I'm coming from here is what constitutes a classic film is all up to one's personal opinion on what you feel is or isn't a classic movie. And this is my thought process behind this. Whenever I decide to call a film a classic, it's a combination of things. It's a film that is definitely a bit older. Um, can't be a film from this year. It can't be a film from 5 years ago. It can't be a film from 10 years ago. It can't be from this decade. it's got to be at least 20 years old for me, if not older. So what constitutes a classic film to me is something like Fritz Lang's Metropolis or uh, Carl Lammel's Phantom of the Opera. I believe Carl Lammel is the one who directed that. The one with, I'm just trying to make sure if I got the directors. Yeah, Carl Lammel. Yep. Rupert Julian. Oh, okay, it's Rupert Julian. He was one of the producers. Rupert Julian, Lon Chaney, Ernest Lammel, and Edward Sedgwick. So Rupert Julian. Rupert Julian. I'm glad I checked that out because I wanted to make sure I got that right. But yeah, like films like Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney, directed by Rupert Julian, or films like, the Universal Monster movies, or Robert Wise's The Haunting, or Mario Bava's Black Sunday. Films like that, to me personally, are classics, or Howard Hawks's Thing from Another World. I do like that film. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I do enjoy the film. I just haven't seen it in forever. I really love Robert Wise's Day the Earth Stood Still. I think that's a classic. Um, so those are the type of films that I consider classics, and I even consider films in the '80s classics like Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, or in films in the '90s. Like I honestly am going to say I think Predator 2 is a classic movie. That's my personal interpretation. That's because my personal interpretation of what is a classic film isn't just related to how old it is. Like I said, it's a combination of things. The other part of this thought process of mine is that it's a combination. It's basically, is it good? That's what a classic equals good for me, or great. Great films. That's what they're not really good. That's I wouldn't really call a film that's just good classic. Great films. Films that I personally think are great movies. I can call classics and have no problem with it. And the reason why is because that's how I look at it. It's an older film. It's not from the past 10 years or 5 years. It's not from this decade that I personally think is a great movie in its own right for a lot of different reasons. And that's why I call it a classic. And I think a lot of classic films to me are great movies that have great stories, they have great characters, they have some really, if they're dealing with special effects, they have some great special effects. If they're a horror film, they got great scares and they deliver some great chills. If it's a sci-fi movie, it's got some really cool, ingenious um, plot that involves an interesting twist or something that's really good sci-fi, a good story, really, for the most part. Great sci-fi movies like Blade Runner and others just have great stories. And that's just how I interpret it anyway. And with dramas, it's got great characters and it holds a lot of weight and really delivers some great emotions and really does a great job making you feel for these characters. And an action movie does a great job giving you thrills and getting your adrenaline pumping. And this same thing applies to any other genre of film. And the same thing goes for, I think a lot of great films or classic movies to me they always have a lot in common. They have great stories, they have great direction, they have great cinematography, they have great editing, they have great visual effects and special effects if that's what the film needs the story to have. And they also have a great score. That's a big thing for me too. Great score, a good balance of tone and everything else. And most importantly, they're entertaining. They're not boring. And for me personally, Psycho is kind of boring. So was the original Night of the Living Dead. Not a big fan of the original Night of the Living Dead either. I think Dawn of the Dead is a way better film, and I think both Dawn of the Deads are better, including the original Dawn of the Dead by George Romero and the remake by Zack Snyder. I personally feel are much better zombie movies and much better films than the original Night of the Living Dead. And I'm not afraid to admit that because that's how I honestly feel. I think the 1990 remake by Tom Savini is a better film than the original Night of the Living Dead. I think Psycho 2, for me personally, is more of a classic to me than Psycho. But that's just me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with what I'm saying either. But that's the thing. There are definitely people out there, and probably people watch this video and they go, "Oh, you're just a dumbass. You don't know what you're talking about, or you're full of shit and you have shitty taste in movies, and you know what? You just don't get it, and you just need to appreciate the film in order to fully appreciate the movie. A movie like Psycho, you have to put yourself into the time frame the film was released." And try to do that and try to do it and then you'll fully appreciate it. I don't get that line of thinking because for one, that's physically impossible. Unless I have a DeLorean time machine that I can get in with Doc Brown and Marty and I can go back to 1960, but even then, I still wouldn't be able to, it would be the same problem because I'm not from 1960. I wasn't born in that era. I wasn't living in that era. So it's really hard for anyone, it's really, honestly, it's kind of nonsensical for me personally to ask anyone from this particular series of decades, to put themselves in the shoes of somebody who was a kid when they saw Psycho in 1960, or they were an adult and it's really hard to do that. I think it's honestly impossible because of everything that we've seen, all of that, and so forth and so on. So, and honestly, if you have to go through that length and that much of an effort to put yourself in a special mindset in order to appreciate and enjoy the film, that maybe it's not that great of a film to begin with. That's just my personal opinion. I know it's a shocker, but that's a personal opinion of mine. Maybe it's not really that great to begin with. There's a lot of films that I've seen from decades past that I just don't really care for personally. And I can't get into them because there's a lot of these older movies, and some of them I can, like Metropolis and Phantom of the Opera, and a few select films like the Universal Monster movies and so forth. But others, I just have a really hard I really have a hard time getting into them, like Citizen Kane. I'd watch that in film studies class, and it had some great shots, and it did some amazing things, and it was a revolutionary film in terms of filming techniques and directing techniques and editing and transitions and everything. It looks great, but I have a hard time getting involved in the film because I don't give a crap about the characters. I don't care about the story, and I find it pretty dull and boring. That's just me personally. Psycho is a film that I love the look of it. It's got a great direction. Anthony Perkins is great, but it has no impact because everything's been dulled because of everything that came after it. And that's and yeah, Psycho is a film that revolutionized the horror genre in a way it was the birth of the slasher film. But just because it was the first one to do it doesn't mean that it's the best. It raised the bar, and then in my opinion there are other films like it, other films in that particular genre who have soared way over that bar since then, since 1960. And that's the thing. I don't really I That's why I kind of I'm not really the biggest fan of Psycho, but I appreciate it and I respect it. I do. But I think there's a kind of a confusion that goes in with when they're viewing films like this. They look at it and just look at its status and look at, okay, it was the first to do this and it was a groundbreaking film, so that means it's automatically one of the best ever. And I think honestly, just go with how you feel. If you feel Psycho was great, awesome. I have no problem with that. You love the movie. You think it's the greatest horror film of all time. You think it's your number one favorite film ever. That's awesome. I have no problem with that. I'm not mad at anyone. I'm not gonna be getting down anybody's throat, or really I'm not upset at all by people who love that movie or love any movie that I don't personally like that much. I'm not that type of person. But I just don't like it when you get that reaction when you just say, "Hey, I'm not the biggest fan," and then it's like you're the dunce in the room. And then people look at you like, "Well, you're not a real film buff then if you don't love Psycho." And I'm like, "No, that's just my personal opinion. I don't love the movie. I don't love Citizen Kane either. I don't love Casablanca. That's my personal opinion. It doesn't mean I'm not a film buff. It doesn't mean that I'm not a real film critic or any of that crap. It just means that I don't really personally care for those movies that much. And that's just my personal opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just like there's nothing wrong with them loving those movies and saying they're some of the greatest movies of all time. There's no problem with them feeling the way that they feel, but if I feel that they aren't that great, then whoa, there's a problem. No, that's not how this works. If there's no problem with people loving those movies and really enjoying them and liking them, there shouldn't be a problem with people who don't like them. I'm just saying there's no reason why it should not go both ways. But yeah, Psycho was a film that I respect immensely for what it brought to the horror genre, but in my opinion, there have been films that have come out after it that have soared way over the bar that it set. And I feel the same way for Romero's Night of the Living Dead. I feel the same way for Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. I'm not the biggest fan of that movie either. I respect those films. There are things about them I like. I don't hate the movies. I don't even think they suck. I'm going to say, I don't even think they suck. I don't think they're bad films, so to speak. They're just not my personal cup of tea. And they're not my idea of a classic movie. Because they're not classics to me. So that's the thing. That's what I'm just trying to get across here. Is that in my opinion, a classic film is of personal interpretation. It's subjective, and it's not just something that is just all inclusive. Just because critics think it's classic, and these many people think it's a classic, then it automatically is a classic. No, to me personally, that's not the case. And if you agree with me, cool. If you don't, that's fine too. Because like I said, uh, I there shouldn't be a problem with people agreeing with other people's opinions, and there isn't most of the time. And there shouldn't be a problem with people disagreeing with other people's opinions either. But there's always a problem for some reason. There's always a problem with somebody when it comes to that part, and I I can't wrap my brain around that. I really don't understand that. I don't get why that's such a problem for people, to some people. It's just a problem for us as humans. We just can't get past that. It's just an opinion. It's not a personal affront to you. You don't have to act like somebody just pimp smacked your mom or anything. It isn't a personal attack. It's just somebody sharing their personal opinion, and they just say that, well, I disagree, and I don't think that film is really that great. And that's what makes this world interesting. If and the different opinions. And I think that should be encouraged and not discouraged, especially in the realm of film and film analysis. And I think Psycho is definitely one of those films that's been so oversaturated because of its praise, because of so many film scholars and so many essays about it, and so many. It's like everything has been about Psycho has been analyzed and deconstructed to the end of time, and that in itself has been a detriment to the movie because now it's been severely overexposed. Now now it doesn't have any of the bite or any of the suspense or any of the genuine shocks that it once had. So that makes it really hard for anyone to just decide to watch the film nowadays without knowing anything about the movie. Because anytime you go around, you look up Psycho, it's become such a big part of the cultural lexicon that it's really pretty much almost impossible to view the film without having some sort of bias towards it already, because you already know what's going to happen. You already know about the really highly what's praised about it. You already know the twist, and you've probably already seen the shower scene multiple times over and over, especially if you're a horror fan. So that's the thing with Psycho to me, and for other films like that that are considered timeless classics. To me, if they have been oversaturated to the point where they don't hold weight anymore in today's day and age, then maybe they really aren't that great anymore. Maybe they've honestly started to age a little bit. Maybe they're not as effective as they were in the 1960. And I actually would probably that's how I feel. I don't think Psycho nowadays is nearly as effective of a film as it was in 1960 because of everything that I have seen after it. And so that does color my opinions and it does end up changing my views on the film, but that's natural. I shouldn't have to throw those away when I watch Psycho and just, oh, well, whatever. I've seen films that I think are better than this, but nope, Psycho was better because it did this. It was a groundbreaking horror film. It broke all this new ground for the genre. It was the first to do so many things, so it's automatically better than A Nightmare on Elm Street, even though I personally would say, fuck no, because I really think A Nightmare on Elm Street is a better horror film than Psycho. But but no, I can't do that because it's Psycho. No! Fuck that shit. Fuck that noise. When it comes to anything like that, it comes to any film, no matter how popular it is, or no matter how successful or how critically acclaimed it is, go with your personal opinion. Go with how you feel about the movie. Go into it. If you have to clear your head, if you have to go into it and just forget about all the other horror films you saw before you see Psycho, then that's not really honestly that's not realistic to me, and that's just it's not fair to the other films that you've seen. So to me, a good film is a good movie. It doesn't matter what era it's from. It doesn't matter how successful it was. It doesn't matter how many critics gave it 5 out of 5 stars and 2 thumbs up and named it on the AFI whatever classics lists. It doesn't matter how many top 10, top 100, top 500 lists the film is on. If you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you think a certain film is a classic, if you feel that Leviathan is a classic movie, then that's fine. Then Leviathan is a classic film. Because it's a classic film to you. And it might be a classic film to other people. But it doesn't have to be for everybody. But it's a classic film to you, and that's honestly what really matters the most. So when you go and see a film that is critically acclaimed like Psycho or Night of the Living Dead or The Exorcist, don't feel that you have to be handcuffed and have to empty your head of all these other films that you've already seen in order to enjoy and appreciate it. I don't think that's I don't think that's I don't think that's a good idea. I don't even understand where this line of thinking came from. I don't know where this came from personally. It's 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 just putting the other films that you've seen that you enjoyed at a serious disadvantage because when you saw those films, did you clear your head and watch them as if you never saw the other films before it? No, you didn't do that. So if I didn't have to clear my head and, not think of any other film that I've already seen and try to put myself in the time frame of 1960, if I didn't have to do that with, for example, well, not the same era, but for example, if I didn't have to do that for Back to the Future, which I saw in the theater, if I didn't have to put myself in the time frame of 1985 in order to enjoy the movie. I didn't have to erase my memories of all these other movies that I saw that had similar elements, uh, or similar plot lines and Back to the Future to enjoy it. It even when I first saw the film, I didn't have to do that. There are a lot of films that I've seen for the first time. Some of these independent films I've seen lately. I didn't have to erase what I've seen before in order to enjoy It Follows. So I shouldn't have to do that in order to enjoy or in order to appreciate Psycho. Because honestly, I appreciate Psycho and I do respect it, but I don't like the film itself. I don't like the film as a whole. What am I supposed to say? I'm supposed to say that it's just a great movie just because of its reputation and just because it's critically acclaimed and just because it was groundbreaking. Birth of the Nation was a groundbreaking film, was the first ever Hollywood blockbuster, but I think that movie is terrible because it's an awful piece of KKK propaganda and is a piece of a terrible part of our history. Now I do appreciate it. Not really. I don't really necessarily appreciate the film. I respect it. It's for some aspects for what it brought to the film industry, to the birth of the Hollywood blockbuster, but I don't really respect the film. I don't think I should have to either, because it's a film that's pretty much a giant propaganda piece for the Ku Klux Klan. So that film is incredibly, unbelievably revolutionary in terms of its impact to American cinema, but I do not have to respect that movie. I can respect it a little bit, but I don't have to respect it all the way, and I don't have to appreciate it either, and I don't have to like it either. So if any people could feel free to not even, if they don't appreciate Psycho, fine. But respect, I think, is due for that film. But I mean, because it's not like Psycho was like Birth of the Nation, where it's like, oh, that's some really messed up subject material, a bad part of our history that's kind of hard to give respect to. Psycho's just a suspense thriller from 1960, which is a groundbreaking film in the genre of horror. And I would hope at least you could respect the film and for what it's done for the genre, which is what I do. I do respect the film a lot for what it's done for the genre. Same thing goes for Night of the Living Dead and Rosemary's Baby. But I don't like those films that much. They're not even in my top 100. They're not even in my top 200. I don't even know if they're even in my top 500 when it comes to my favorite horror films. But that's just me personally. I don't think those films are classics to me. And there you go. That's the main point I was trying to make in this long-winded video. I hope I clarified myself well enough. And feel free, folks. What do you think constitutes a classic film to you? What makes a film classic to you? What are your classic films? And feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below on that. And I hope you guys enjoy the video, and yeah, I guess I will see you guys later. See ya.